Me.
Oh, nice. Okay, great. Well, I'll let folks in and we'll just sort of, get everybody settled and get started if that works for you
Okay.
guys. Awesome.
Great, thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I know you're probably all connecting to audio. There's that fun moment where you're here, but you're still connecting to audio. So we'll kind of draw that out a little bit so you don't feel like you're missing anything. Get everybody logged in here. But good evening, everyone. My name is Jenny, and I am with Anderson's Bookshops, and I am very pleased to welcome you all and our guest author and our moderator this evening to this virtual event. We're really glad that you took the time to, put your eyes on another screen, even though it's beautiful outside and it's finally summer and things are starting to open up a little bit. But we're not quite there yet as to having in-person events. So we're really glad that you could be with us this evening virtually. We appreciate that. Just an accessibility housekeeping note, we have turned on the live transcript feature. So if you would like subtitles or a full transcript as provided by Zoom, you can choose that using the little live transcript or CC button, which is at the bottom of your own screen. So that's available for you. For those of you who aren't familiar with Anderson's, we are an independent bookstore based in Naperville and Downers Grove. We have been owned and run by the Anderson family for going on 6 generations. We were actually just speaking a little bit earlier about family histories with Anderson's being one of the long-standing families in town. So, but as an independent business, your support is very, very personal to us. So we just like to take a minute to say thank you for that. It has really kept us going during these difficult COVID times when our store had to be closed for a while, but your support really is appreciated by us. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. Normally, we do before times, as I like to call them, we would do over 400 in-person events a year. And we'll get back to that at some point, I promise. We are trying to figure out what that looks like right now, perhaps later in the year. But we are continuing to do virtual events in the meantime. Just a couple of other things coming up. Another local author, Sharon Doring. We have Lori Frankel, Stacey Abrams, Kate Moore, who wrote Radium Girls, which of course had a local tie for that topic. And the new book is about a mental institution in Jacksonville, Illinois. So another sort of local tie. We'll call Illinois local in that sense. And also local author Susan Elizabeth Phillips. So all of that is coming up. Please visit our website, andersonsbookshop.com, to find the next event that we can welcome you to. Another little housekeeping, we are going to avoid spoilers this evening. So we are all assuming that nobody has read the book. I know some of you may have, but we're going to kind of function on the assumption that you have. I know there's some things that are revealed, so we want to save that opportunity for those who have not. But tonight, I would like to officially welcome Julie McGue and Susan Connor. Julie Ryan McGue is an author, a domestic adoptee, and an identical twin. She writes extensively about finding out who you are, where you belong, and making sense of it. And of course, this new book, Twice a Daughter, is about just that. Born in Chicago, she received a BA from Indiana University in psychology, and she earned a master's in marketing from Northwestern University. She has served multiple terms on the board of the Midwest Adoption Center and is an active member of the American Adoption Congress. Married for over 35 years, Julie and her husband split their time between Northwest Indiana and Sarasota, Florida. She is a mother of 4 adult children and has 3 grandsons. And if she's not at her computer, she's on the tennis court or out exploring with her Nikon, which sounds a wonderful way to spend your time. And joining us as moderator is her friend, Susan Connor, who is an ardent reader, averaging 60 to 65 books per year. And she's also been a member of the same book club for over 17 years, which we were just discussing is amazing. For 32 years, she specialized in defense medical malpractice litigation. She chairs the governing board of McNeil Hospital in Berwyn. She received her JD from Loyola University School of Law in Chicago and a BA from Gustavus Adolphus College in Minnesota. She lives in Riverside and is married with 2 adult daughters. So welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
We are both thrilled to be able to talk to Anderson's Bookshop, and our connections to Bennett are so embedded in the community. And Sue and I, for those of you on the call don't realize, Sue and I went to Bennett together, met as freshmen, and I'm not sure if it was in an English class or not, Sue, but our friendship has stayed tight throughout the years. And when I started on the road with my book, I asked Sue if she'd be the moderator, and I twisted her arm a little bit.
Wonderful. Well, I can't wait to hear the conversation, so I'll turn it over to you too.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And Anderson Bookstore is a great bookstore. Sorry we can't be in person to all interact, but that'll come soon enough. So tonight we're going to ask a couple questions about the book, and I'm going to hopefully allow Julie an opportunity to read from her book, some sections that we can also do some follow-up questions. And depending on the time, we welcome questions from you. Again, we're going to work under the assumption that you have not read the book, but we also would be very interested if any of you who are watching are part of what's called the adoption triangle. So if you are an adoptee, an adoptive parent, or a birth parent, you may have some additional questions that you may want to ask Julie. So Twice a Daughter, a search for identity, family, and belonging. In the very first chapter, you start asking questions about, is this time to start the search? And you decide yes, because of your health issues, because of your husband, for a lot of reasons. And so I'm going to start off this presentation with a question. What kept you from starting the search before 2008?
Well, I had a wonderful family that I grew up in. My sister and I, twins, were the oldest. And then I have another brother right below us, 2 years younger, that's also adopted through Catholic Charities. And then, as often happens with parents that adopt, my parents had infertility issues. And then all of a sudden, they had 3 biological children of their own. So I grew up in a big family, very Catholic. All of us went to Bennett. And I would say that I had questions in my mind as a young girl. Why was I placed for adoption? What were the circumstances? Certainly, we had no information because of basically what closed adoption is all about. It's the right to privacy for birth parents and adoptive parents, but basically no information is passed down. There's both good and bad, and the good for adoptive parents is that they have no interference from the birth parents and how they're raising their child. The bad for somebody like me, when I reached 48 years old, I went for a breast biopsy and I had no medical history. And I had some other health issues, which I talk about in the book. And that was what spurred my husband to basically demand that I do some kind of research. And at that time in Illinois, the adoption laws were undergoing some change. They had not quite changed in 2008, but in 2011, adoptees about my age or a little older were able to have access to their original birth records. So that's what happened.
So do you think how your parents would react to your decision to search influenced your delay until 2008?
Without a doubt. I think I always knew, while they supported it and always said to my sister Jenny and I that they would support us if we wanted to research our closed adoption. I think I always knew that it would be a big disappointment to them. They would feel that they were lacking in some way in their parenting or what they provided for us. And so I think my loyalty and allegiance to them prevented me from getting serious about it until my health issues basically prescribed that I get at it. So
we're going to ask you some questions without giving away the challenges that you encountered during your search, but perhaps you can give us a sense early in your book from reading a portion of the beginning of your search and how the conversation with your parents went.
Sure. I'm going to just read a couple of paragraphs from one of the early chapters. And it's when I was going over to my parents' apartment to get my adoption papers, because that was what Jenny and I thought was the first step. As I shift from one foot to the other, I consider what awaits me behind the wide door with its centered peephole and brass knocker. Dad might be reading another thriller or blasting the White Sox spring opener, his ill-fitting hearing aids lying somewhere other than in his ears. Mom could be thumbing through the mail order catalog stacked on the coffee table, Or together, they might be flipping through the yellowing sheets of my adoption papers, planning what to say to me tonight. By now, they're probably studying their watches, figuring that the evening stream of commuter trains has made me late again. As I reach for the doorknob, I chastise myself for letting Steve pressure me into tackling this adoption search now. And I wonder if the speech I've prepared is good enough to soothe the hurt and doubt that I suspect my parents are experiencing. I hope my parents are remembering me as the good student that I was throughout my school years, the diligent, reliable, commended leader, rarely in trouble, but who was often a tiny bit sassy. I think of the pride they've expressed in having me as their daughter, but maybe tonight they view me as a malcontent or a troublemaker. Surely they know my goal is not to recycle them as parents. So that is the lead into what happens when I go into their apartment and get the adoption papers that start the ball rolling.
So you get the reaction from your parents. You've made the decision to start searching for your birth parents and your medical history. Did you have any idea what kind of challenges you would encounter along the way?
No, I was very naive and thinking that number one, I thought the adoption papers would provide more information. I also thought that I would be able to access more records right away than I was able to. And the very first search agency that I contacted, I thought we would get farther. So every step of the way, I was naively thinking it was going to pan out quicker than it did. Now, back then, 2010, DNA was really not what it is now. And certainly in my case, when I did actually do some DNA testing, I was only getting matches with third and fourth cousins. I didn't have any names to match up when people would say, oh, we're related. What are your family names? I had no names. So it really didn't pan out for me. And for some adoptees, it doesn't. When they go searching, it really, the testing system is based on the subscribers who's decided to sign up and how much research they've done. So you can get lucky or unlucky. And just like everything else I tried in the beginning, the DNA analysis didn't help at all.
So the book will describe many of your efforts and some of the resources that you ultimately used after the initial disappointment with the first investigators. So tell us a little bit about the legal system and the individuals at the courtroom that allowed you to maybe make some progress in your search.
One of the things that I ended up using besides my adoption agency was the confidential intermediary program, which in 2010 was a pretty new program, and it allowed me to request a judge to assign somebody to my case, and that person, the intermediary, had access to all the closed adoption records at Catholic Charities, which is where our adoption was facilitated from. And the intermediary knew the names in our file, but we did not. So she actually accessed databases and sent a letter out to my birth mom. And we waited for her to respond. And without giving away too much, there's a scene in the book where we get the news that she had received the letter and she didn't want to make contact right away. So it's a really dark moment. And because of the disappointment, we knew we weren't going to be able to get our medical records. We were not going to get any medical history or personal background. Jenny and I had to discuss what we were going to do next. And like detectives, we were on to the next search angel to try and help us.
So the confidential intermediary, can't even talk anymore. Did she help you reach out to other sources? I think the book makes reference to you participating in some post-adoption group therapy, and that seemed to be an important opportunity for you to reflect on your search and also get some insight about how your mom and your birth mom may be feeling. You want to explain a little bit about that for us?
Well, the confidential intermediary program was different than the adoption agency. And because we were in this little valley of our search and not really knowing what was going to happen next, if our birth mom would change her mind, or if we were going to be able to find our birth father, we were in a big valley. And so I reached out to Catholic Charities and the social worker there, and they had a program called Post-Adoption Support Group. And I started going to the meetings, and at those meetings, other adoptees were there, adoptive parents, birth parents, and I got to hear other people's stories, their search successes and failures. And it was like being in a family of people that understood the language, understood the emotions that everybody was feeling. And that support system got me through that really low point where we were still waiting for what would hopefully happen next, something good. And I'm still involved in that group. It's very rewarding to be part of people's stories, and we cheer for each other when they have, some kind of word from a birth relative or some kind of reunion, and pictures fly around the table, and oh, you do look like your mother, or you do look like your father. So that's a wonderful group to be part of, and it's certainly helped me get through the low points in our search.
Was it the result of being in therapy, or was it before that you were starting to document a potential memoir or book?
Well, my mother-in-law, who I was very close to, was very involved with coaching me on what to do. She taught reminiscence writing at a community college in Michigan. And she said, you have to write all this down, keep a journal, keep notes on what people said, keep notes on, what you were thinking and where you were and, what kind of day it was. And it turns out that those notes, those journals were really instrumental in me putting this book together, as I had all that research to go back to and resurrect scenes and make the story come alive. So I credit a lot of it to my mother-in-law, but I also credit journaling to Mr. White at Bennett Academy. I don't know if any of the listeners on the show had Mr. White at Bennett, but we had a whole class where we had to keep a journal, and it was critiqued. So we learned to do it right.
So your sister, your twin sister,
who might actually be on this call here somewhere.
I won't say anything inappropriate, but she was there to help you, although you, having not a full-time job like Jenny, could do some of the searching more aggressively. Is there a point though where you and Jenny are able to share together this experience of searching for your birth mom before she is found?
Well, we talked about every step of the way, and we agreed from the very beginning that because of Jenny's full-time job, and I was a stay-at-home mom, that I would do all the legwork, and we would talk at every decision point, and split the cost. And at the beginning, we didn't really know how much that was going to be, but it did end up adding up after a while. So. But most importantly, we talked every step of the way. If this isn't working, let's try that. If that doesn't work, let's go back and do this. And a lot of this I talk about in the book. because we were twins and had grown up together, we had our own understanding of things. Some people do have twins, I think, that are on this call, so they get this. But with twins, it's almost like you have a passenger driver relationship. There's some things that Jenny takes the lead on, and I say, oh, yeah, go ahead and do that. And in this case, this was my project. I took the lead on it. She supported me. We talked about it. There wasn't any disagreement or conflict about it. We were just in agreement that we're going to take this as far as we can go. And that support, I think, helped me get through a lot of the really difficult parts of the search.
So there's a lot of difficult parts of the search, but then there are certain surprises. I know that you had made efforts to try to reach out to St. Vincent's Orphanage early on, but they wouldn't let you in.
Turns out you need an appointment to go into any Catholic facility.
So being wiser and more knowledgeable, you did make arrangements for an appointment, and Jenny was with you. And how was that experience to finally get back into the orphanage?
Well, I actually didn't know where St. Vincent's Orphanage was. And it wasn't until I started doing the research and got information through Catholic Charities that I realized that it's this beautiful building about 2 blocks from Holy Name, beautiful red brick building that takes up like a whole city block. And I was astounded that I passed by this building when I lived downtown for years and years and realized, wow, that's literally where we lived for the first part of our life before we joined the Ryan family. And so it was a very emotional moment to walk up to the doors of St. Vincent's. And we had set up a tour with the social worker from Catholic Charities, and walking through the orphanage and realizing that's where we started off together was really a profoundly moving moment. I talk about that in the book. And we got a tour of the chapel, which is oddly enough one of the secrets that we discovered in the course of our search, that we thought we had always been baptized at Holy Name, which was the seat of the archdiocese. And that is just where the records are kept and certified. We actually had been baptized in the chapel at St. Vincent's. And so there's a scene where we go up to the chapel and we actually see the baptismal bowl, which is the same exact one from 60 years ago.
So you're writing a memoir where you're trying to be factual about your experience, but you also have a wonderful writing skill, and you can imagine events and recall things in a way that is magical. How about sharing with us a little bit of one of those moments, particularly when you're at St. Vincent's?
Okay. I'll just read a couple paragraphs from towards the end of this chapter where we're at St. Vincent's, Jenny and I together with the social worker. And we're standing at the baptismal bowl. As I follow the deep red veining that snakes down one side towards the bowl's center, time slows for me. I imagine my infant self, 16 days old, held by a nurse's aide, and my sister in the arms of another young nursing student. Cradled in these women's arms, I envision a look of wonder in their eyes. And yes, I see something else. Pity. My stand-in godparent felt sorry for me. Such a beautiful baby with such pale skin, such big eyes, so innocent. Abandoned, she's thinking. Who could abandon this precious child? Yes, who could? Could I do it and abandon one of mine? The nurse studies my wrinkled brow, which means I'm about to wail. She smooths away my cry with the tip of a finger, brings me in close, and shoos away the heaving in my chest. She kisses me near my temple and whispers in my ear. I shush and study her lips, trying to discern her words. There now, she says. You're next. Here's your turn to be free of that original sin that mars your soul. Soon you'll be clean, pure in God's eyes, and then you'll become the child of a mother who will love you more than you have ever imagined you could be loved. While I cannot know that any of this transpired, it settles me to think that it might have, and I'm thankful. Grateful to that woman, my stand-in godparent, whoever she was.
So it looks like you are starting to have some empathy for both your mom and your birth mom after a couple of these rougher moments. And that empathy, was that something you discovered, something someone asked you to think about, something that was said by either you or your birth mom, or your mom or your birth mom ultimately? And what role did that have in your search going forward?
Well, one of the things that happens with memoir writers is we have to give ourselves some emotional distance after triggering moments like I went through with this search. And so the search was from 2010 essentially through 2014. And it took me a while to digest all of the events that happened. And I took some memoir writing classes. And it was really 2 years ago where I sat down and wrote this in earnest. And I think that that emotional distance, the time that I took to digest my story, allowed me not to be that angry adoptee where that had all these really rough things happen, and allowed me to accept the situation and forgive, but also see some of the beautiful things that came out of the search. The um, great relationship that I have with my adoptive mom still. We went through some rough moments, but we got to the other side. There's a couple tough chapters in the middle of the book where my mom and I have some tough scenes, her grappling with what I'm doing and who I'm finding and the results of things. And the important part of leaving those chapters in is to see, the arc of the story and the arc of the characters. And we make it to the other side, and we make it through because we want to keep our relationship strong. And I think that is one of the examples of the book, is that you have to work hard at relationships and you can't give up on them. And certainly my bond with my parents that that raised me was very strong and still is.
It sounds like when you sat down ultimately to start writing the book, things changed, but just writing the book, and now a year and a half later after it's been published and now out for readership, did your views change anymore?
I think my views changed a lot as I wrote the book. Certainly it went through 3, 4, 5 edits. And each time that I changed how I was telling the chapters, I learned a little bit more about myself and how I thought about what had happened. One of the gifts of writing memoir is the ability to look back and reflect upon what happened and what you thought then and what you think now. And I think one of the things I learned about myself was that my ability to accept and forgive was bigger than I would have thought it would have been.
And in terms, it sounds like the relationship with your mom is wonderful. And I guess it's a spoiler, we know that you do meet your mom, your birth mom. How about the relationship with your husband, your sister, your own children? Did this search or writing this memoir have any impact on your relationship with them?
Well, 2 of the girls were in college when most of this was happening. So that meant that my son and my daughter, youngest daughter, was home. And I think that they knew a lot was going on, that but I didn't sit down and share with them how I was feeling about it. I would just say, right now nothing's happening, or right now we can't find her. And so they didn't really realize the extent of everything that was going on until they read the book. And about in March, my son was with me and we were on a plane and we were flying somewhere and he was reading the book, and looked over at him and he was crying. He was kept wiping his face, and I tapped his shoulder and, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were going through all of this at that time. Where was I?" I said, "You were just being a kid. You were growing up. You were in college. You were doing your stuff." So I think it has opened up more conversation with our children. And one of the things that I'm happy about, having done all this research and made connections with a lot more family, is my children have their medical history now. They have their family history. We have had a little saying when the kids were growing up. Anytime they did something really good or really bad, we would blame it on the mystery gene. And now that mystery gene has a name and we know where it comes from. And so there's some good surprises in the book. 3 of the kids that I see, one of them is on the call here, but 3 of them went and played college sports. And that somehow we figure out where a lot of that came from. And it's a fun surprise.
When you were writing this memoir, did you have an intended audience? And the reason why I'm asking this question is, the adoption triangle, which is something I learned thanks to having all these discussions with you and having read the book, and learned all the things you've learned over the last 6 years. So who is it that this book is for?
Well, when I started writing, and I was writing my story, the way I remembered it happening, and it had so many twists and turns that I thought it would be very entertaining. And other people had said, I hope you're writing this. But in the course of writing the story, I realized, because of my work with my adoption group, that the story was also their story. They had so many of the same emotions and feelings and joys and disappointments that I did. So I was writing it for my community. And another goal when I finished the book was creating an awareness in community. It's easy to judge an adoptee that is doing something like this, searching for their history. And sometimes people think you're being ungrateful to your adoptive family by doing this. Certainly I wasn't. I had medical reasons why I wanted to do it. But there were a lot of myths that I was trying to dispel. Not all adoptive parents support their children when they want to research their history. I think that is a myth. Not all birth parents want to be found, which is definitely something that all of us that decide to search for relatives figure out. So there were a lot of myths that I dispelled. And I think by talking about those issues, the people that have not been touched by adoption have a better understanding of what all of us in the adoption triangle have had to deal with. Essentially, there's a lot of joy with adoption, but there is also a lot of loss. Adoptive parents in general usually have fertility issues, so they have some losses that they deal with before they start their family. For people like me from close adoption, we lost all of our identity, where we came from, who the people were, everything. And birth parents, they lose the ability to parent the child that they place for adoption. So there's a lot of loss. And I think talking about that and acknowledging the fact that adoption is a wonderful solution, but it also has some heartaches. I think bringing that forth is part of why I wrote the book.
And I think from your own experiences, the book also recognizes that a lot of birth mothers really didn't give up a child. They had a circumstance that really made them make a decision that I think the correct terminology is they were not going to be the one to parent you. They were going to allow someone else to parent you. And so it's not a matter about birth moms not choosing you or wanting to give you away. So I think there's a
Yeah, and
Really
certainly the
clear-
circumstances for a lot of women back when in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of shame associated with having an unwed pregnancy, and families sent their daughters away, and they were never talked to. The whole situation was not talked about again. So the transparency that we have now in our society was not what was there during the 50s and 60s when closed adoption was in its heyday.
So I've, in addition to Anderson Books, there's that other A place where you can buy a book. And so there's some reviews that have been posted about your book, well-deserved reviews. And I thought one was very powerful, especially because it was from someone in the adoption triangle. And that review stated, "This book struck a nerve. Even though I consider myself a seasoned searcher, having found my birth mother over 20 years ago before DNA testing and internet, I was riveted as I rode along on Julie's journey. The last piece of my personal search puzzle was to reach out to a half brother that I had found but had not contacted. There exists a tug of war between right to privacy for birth parents and right to know for adoptees that Julie masterfully explores in the book. I've been hiding behind this for the past several years as an excuse in not reaching out to my half brother. Within an hour of finishing the book, I called him. Turns out we have an uncanny and amazing combination of similar interests. Julie's book gave me the strength, courage, and validation to take an important step in my own journey. Whether you are part of the adoption triangle or not, you will be pulled into this true story of mystery and drama, darkness and light." Thank you, Julie.
Wow.
So
Something.
yeah, it is great that you have an impact on people. And it truly was a story of twists and turns. And even though I spoke many an hour with you throughout your search journey, when I'm reading the book, I felt like I was right there. You did a great job describing your emotions and how people reacted to things. So I think before we open it up to chat questions, I'm assuming there's chat questions. I wanted to ask you a little bit about what you're doing now. You obviously wrote a memoir. I don't know if that was what you first intended to write or not, but is there anything else that you're pursuing right
When I was writing the book, I debated if I was going to write a memoir or a biographical novel. And in the end, I decided that it needed to be my story, and it needed to be factual and to put my name on it as opposed to putting a pen name on it. I did change some names in the book based on people's request. A lot of the birth relatives that I find did not want their real names in the book. There's a couple geographic locations that I changed to protect privacy. But in the end, I had decided that I definitely wanted it to be a memoir, and I had to get permission from some of the people in the book. I sent chapters of that people were mentioned in and asked them, "Is this okay? Is there anything that you find offensive?" And very few things came out, but the names did get changed. And then there was people that I was so surprised that said, yeah, keep my name in there. And in fact, the social worker from Catholic Charities who I think walks on water because she helps so many people. She got permission and we kept her name in the book. And I'm very grateful for that because I think it adds a lot of credibility when people will let you keep their name. So one thing I wanted to mention about the book is the cover, Twice a Daughter. So the publisher, when she was working on the cover, said, you know, we're not really coming up with a design that speaks to the title. Do you have any pictures? So I sent her a handful of pictures. First, I checked with Jenny, make sure that was okay. And she came up with this picture. And when I saw the copy, the mocked up copy, and I realized where this picture was taken, it was like, why hadn't I thought of that? So this picture is taken on Lake Michigan when my sister and I were barely teenagers. And oddly enough, this picture is at our summer cottage, which our family loved to go to every summer. And that towards the end of the book, one of the twists in the story has to do with this location. So I love that this picture is on the cover and I'm the one in the white.
So is there any advice that you would give to someone who is thinking about initiating a search for their birth parents?
Well, the number one advice would be to do a lot of reading. There's a lot of really good books out there. Ann Fessler's book, The Girls That Went Away, was one of the first books that I read. And one of the prerequisites that everybody tells you is to make sure you're in a good place in your life, that you've got, you know, a stable job, a good relationship, a good support system, because you have no idea what you're going to walk in and you're going to need those people to pick you up and pull you along. So do a lot of reading, have a good support system, make sure you're in a good place in your life. And then make sure that you have a lot of people that you can ask for help when you need it.
What's next in terms of your writing project?
Oh, yeah, you did ask that question, Sue.
I did, but don't worry. I ask long questions sometimes, so I come back.
I write a blog, and I've been writing a blog for 3 years. So one of the things I'm working on is taking some of my favorite essays and make a collection of essays. I also have a contract with my publisher to write another memoir, and it's a prequel. So what it was like to be a twin and growing up in this big, happy Catholic family and some of the things that happened. And it's got to do with secrets and sisterhood. So that'll come out in 2 years.
Great, great. Is there anything that you discovered about yourself from writing this memoir?
I've actually, Jenny and I have talked about this a few times. I really love to write. I love to sit down. It's relaxing to me. I think about something and then start tapping away and these amazing things come out and I'm like, where did that come from? I wasn't even thinking that. So I love to write. Jenny doesn't like to write. So I think we're the yin and yang as far as that goes. And so I'm sure that I'm going to keep writing stories, whether they're little short ones or big long books.
Okay, great. So Jenny, I don't know if you want to check in. I don't know if there's been many questions submitted on the chat format. I don't want to cut it too short if there are a lot of questions. And if not, we'll find ways to keep Julie busy.
Yes, I feel sure that you can find ways to to still chat. We do have a question from another Julie. Did finding your biological family help ease your sense of loss, or did you experience another wave of feeling loss after learning where you came from and how your life might have been different? She says, I am an adoptee and have reunited with my birth family as an adult. I'm very excited about your book.
I felt a tremendous sense of satisfaction and relief once we made connection with some of our birth relatives, finding out that what our heritage was so satisfying, because you're an adoptee, Julie, too. You know what it feels like to walk in the doctor's office and they start asking you medical questions and you basically say, I don't know. And it's humiliating. It's not anything you can control. And now I proudly go to the doctor's office and say, yep, and I know that, and I know that, and I know that. And so that's very satisfying. Another thing that was really interesting is we found some surprises in our heritage that we had no idea. So my maiden name is Ryan, and we grew up in a family that identified with being very Irish. My sister and I went to lots and lots of St. Patrick's Day parades downtown, lots of Irish festivals. We've been to Ireland a bunch of times. And when I was going through this search, I kept thinking, oh my God, please let me be Irish, because I don't know what I would do with all of this if I'm not. And so when we made contact with our birth mom, she's not Irish at all. So that was like, whoa, I hope there's some on the other side. And for a while we didn't know, but it turns out we are Irish on the other side, but we're something that none of us expected, and that is Native American. I never saw that coming. I'm still trying to figure out, do I claim that? Do I not claim that? I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about it. I think it's really interesting. So I'm still working on, assimilating some of the things that I found.
Well, there.
Oh, go ahead, Sue. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I just see Miss Mary Murphy saying hello to us. Well, hello to you too, Mary. Great to hear from you.
Yes, and Julie would follow a question in the chat that a nurse once told her there was something wrong with her for not knowing her birth history. And humiliating is exactly the right word. I'm so sorry you experienced that. That's just as.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we had no control over that. And then it really, I mean, the doctor's office was probably the worst place for making an adoptee feel like they were less than. And you did feel less than. So
Sue, I actually want to ask you a question as I know you weren't expecting that either. As a friend of someone, what was it like for you helping your friend, your dear long-term friend, through this journey? Did you have any sense of this? And forgive me if you knew as a child, Julie, if you were adopted, and if Sue knew that about you when you met.
Yeah. I did.
Yeah. How was that to support her and to go with her through this?
Well, as I told Julie a couple of weeks ago, within the very first week of knowing her, she told me she was adopted. And I can't remember the exact reason why, but it was nothing said in shame or embarrassment. It was just, I'm adopted. And it really was not something that overwhelmed her life. She had a great family and great siblings. So it really, if she had questions about that, it was more private on her end throughout her high school years. And of course, in high school, there's probably other things to keep you busy. But as far as experiencing her search, I was listening in on a lot of pretty close, tearful nights. There was a lot of tough moments. There was a lot of unanticipated disappointment, and she just had this power in her to keep going. And then when she had, changes that were joyous, the smile couldn't be larger for her and her family. In addition to what joys Julie's experienced, her family has experienced joys as well. And the identity she's obtained trickles down to each one of her family members. And again, I won't give away anything about the story, but it really is a marvelous story for Julie and Jenny and her family. But she was very honest. I think, as she said, she was in a good place through all of this. She had a great husband who He's well described in the book, and he really is a teddy bear. But he was important for her too, to keep her going. But yeah, she did a good job. I'm very proud of her.
Oh, that's amazing that your friendship has lasted. I also have friends from high school that that I hope to still be that close, down the road at that stage. That's really a wonderful thing for you to all both have for each other, no matter what goes on in your lives.
We could have a little Bennett love party. I see Mary Murphy's comment here too about being in Mr. White's class and remembering the same things we do. I think that it was a great foundation and very supportive environment. And we were all lucky to get in that school back then, because I don't know now if any of us could.
Well, I went to Naperville North, so I will allow the Bennett love as a local, but I got to stand up for my Huskies, right?
Right, you do.
No, that's wonderful to hear. Julie, what do you hope that you spoke a little bit about, if you were speaking to someone who was starting the search process, what do you hope that people in other pieces of that triangle take away from your book, both adoptive parents and biological parents?
The importance of communication. And I think I wasn't able to talk to my adoptive mom as closely as I would have liked to through the search. I certainly tried to understand where she was coming from, and likewise, but I think we could have been better at that. And certainly with some of the birth relatives, there's so much stigma associated with being a birth parent that I think, as tough as I had it, and my mom with me on this journey, I think the birth parents really are the ones that need the most understanding, because what they went through and what triggers them, and what holds them back from meeting the children that they didn't parent, I think is too bad that not as many of them accept us back into their lives like they should. Because I think, given what's happened with some of my birth relatives, it's just been an amazing reunion, and so joyful, and a really good outcome.
That's really good to hear, because that's not always the case, I'm sure, for many different situations. I had another question that I was going to ask, and it has fallen completely out of my head. Well, and I guess I was going to ask a little bit about being a twin, and how that shaped this experience. You were obviously adopted together, which may not always happen for some families as well. Like I said, I know you go into that in the book a little bit, so I don't want to delve too much into that. But what was that like? Did you both feel the same way about each of these questions and discoveries along the way? And how did you reconcile that with someone that you're so connected to in a way that most of us don't even know?
I think it was a good thing that only one of us was knee deep in all the muck, because I certainly needed my sister to kind of pull me back out and say, we're good. We're going to be fine through this. Let's put this in perspective. So she was a big support system. One of the things that I like to point out in these conversations is that Catholic Charities had a policy of keeping twins together. And I often think, as hard as this adoption search and reunion process was for me, if I hadn't had my sister and I found out on the other side of it that we'd been separated, that would have been a really cruel joke. So I'm very grateful to Catholic Charities for their policy, and that we went through all this together, and good outcome, like I said.
Absolutely. Well, and as I mentioned to you earlier, Julie, my father is an identical twin, and I know their birthday is tomorrow. So I know I've witnessed that bond firsthand, and also answering the phone and not knowing which of them it was, but that's a different story. But they reveled in that, that's for sure. But that it's a very special thing, and I'm so glad to hear that the two of you were able to do that together, both as children and as adults. I was going to ask you, I know you'd said you'd gone through some of the genealogy searching in looking for your birth family. there's a lot in the news about that right now, that is privacy issues and finding people who've committed crimes years and years and decades on the road. Naperville just had one of those last week, that they finally, something that happened many, many years ago had just been solved through some of those DNA sites. From your side of your perspective on that, how did that help, or do you have any thoughts on how that helped or hindered, and what that might be like for other people?
I think it can be astounding news. I am aware of a couple people in my adoption support group system where they found out that the father that they thought was their dad was not their dad, that it was somebody else. And so there's no way to soften that. It's basically a piece of paper or an email, and you're reading it and you're like, okay, do I call Ancestry DNA or 23andMe and ask if this is right? So I think that it can be alarming to see that news. As I said, it didn't help me at all. Basically because my birth mother used an alias on our original birth record. So I really had no recourse to try and find her. There is a question in the chat that I wanted to answer.
Yes.
My adoptive parents, it was only my mother that really held back on accepting the search. My dad was great the whole way through. And we knew when we were little kids that we were adopted. So we were not that late discovery adoptee whose parents pass away and then they find their adoption papers in the safe deposit box. That wasn't us, gratefully. So I think that helps a lot to know at a young age.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are all the questions that we have in the chat. And if anybody else has got one that you want to burning up your fingertips, but please do type that in. We did want to offer opportunity, since I know that there are many of you here who are friends and family of the authors. I'm going to go ahead and change the settings here. If you would like to turn your video on to say hello and wave, you are welcome to do that. Of course, you do not have to, but if anybody wants to kind of wave, I'm sure that they would love to see that. I hope that for your next book, Julie, we will be beyond all of this quarantining and we can be together, and we'll have a big family and Bennett reunion in the store.
And I just want to say, I don't know if it's on the Anderson Bookstore site, but all you have to do is type in Julie Ryan McGue and you'll get all kinds of information of her blog, her webpage. She's just a rock star now these days in social media. So
yes, well, and I'll drop a link in the chat too. If you don't yet have your signed copy, Julie actually stopped by the store today and signed books. So be sure to order yours.
Mary, you haven't aged a bit.
No, you haven't, Mary. We're waiting for Dan Hogberg to turn his screen on, so we can Jenny and Dan.
He's aged a little bit. So there's Molly and John.
Molly and John. Another Bennett grad.
Oh, there's Dan.
There's Jenny and Dan. There's my
Jenny. Hi. Hi. Okay. Oh, Miss Mary, how are you? Are you still out east, or where are you living now?
Philadelphia area, Philadelphia suburbs. Yeah. Ever since Villanova.
Mary, if it wasn't virtual.
Right. I'm glad that you weren't able to meet in person because I couldn't make the trip.
That is one benefit, right?
Yeah. Right.
Great.
Well, and I love to see people enjoying the digital, but from outside. Thank you for joining us from the nice weather. That's always lovely to see.
Well, thanks again, Jenny, for hosting us, and Sue for being my moderator. This was really fun, and I appreciate that everybody took the time to come.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you to all of you who've joined us from wherever you are across the country. We really appreciate that. And like I say, if you do still need a signed copy, you can grab that from Anderson's. Thank you to Susan for joining us. It's always nice to chat with other book folks who are such big readers. And Julie, thank you for sharing your story. And your journey through all of that. It is truly an amazing story. I can't wait to read more about it myself. And thank you for the time. I know it's busy right now. June is all of a sudden, I feel like June is kind of revving up, right? And so it is, we appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us.
Wonderful. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening. Be
Good
safe
night.
out there.
Thanks to you, Jen.
Thank you. All right. Happy
Bye,
meeting.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Mary, you look great. We'll have to find a way to get in
So
touch.
good to see
Okay.
you guys.
Yeah. All right, we'll find a way. Go to Julie's webpage and then we'll find a way to get connected.
Reconnect. Great.
Yes.
Okay.
Have a Bennett Zoom. I love it.
Okay, yes. All right. Okay.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.